Now we've gone over singing, the main melodies, harmonizing them, and now another thing that you can use as either a main vocal or texture depending on the song is screaming. Now, there's a few general categories that screaming can fall under. You can have low screaming, mid screaming, and high screaming, which is basically low range, mid range, and high range. Also, there's yelling, which kind of falls in between the singing, screaming spectrum. So if you're looking for something that's a little more pitch oriented. Now, whatever singer you're working with is going to dictate what you're able to do with this. You know, they might not scream at all, so you might not have to use screaming. But this is still good things to keep in mind if you ever work with a screamer, or if you're just looking to add that nice little texture in there that could make a part pop. So now what we're going to do is we're going to dive into the session, and this song doesn't actually have screams, but what we're going to do for the sake of showing you how screams can be useful is we're going to pick a section and we're going to add some screams to it. So let's start with low screams. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new scream track, and I'm going to put this over the very last chorus. If I was going to pick a spot that screaming would be suited for, it'd be for the big finale, the big climax. So as many layers as we can have in there. So let's start a new audio track. Let's label it for the sake of labeling it. New scream vocal. So now let's go to the last chorus and track some low screams. Already I'm starting to not feel the low scream. I kind of had a hunch before I started this that a low scream wouldn't really be practical for this part. So let's try a mid-range instead. So what we'll do is we'll undo that, and let's try mid-range. So let's take a listen to this real fast. Alright, so I like the sound of that a lot better than the low scream. Now, I think it's good. What I want to do is I want to add another layer that we can pan. We can pan hard left, hard right, and then blend them in the mix a little bit to add that wide, larger than life sound. So let's duplicate this track. And let's track that. For the sake of getting a rough idea what this will sound like in the mix, let's pan these hard right and hard left. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to blend them just a little bit more down in the mix. Obviously, this is something that can be left for the mixing engineer, but I'm going to do it just for the sake of giving you a better idea of what it'll sound like. There. It's not too loud in the mix, and it's just a nice little subtle punch to add to it. So those sound good to me as a starting point. So what I want to do next is I feel like it could cut through the mix a little bit more. So a technique that's pretty cool is we can do another set of screaming, which is a different register that's just going to make it pop a little bit more. And depending on what mixing technique you use, it can either sound like two separate screams in the mix, or you can blend it so it sounds like one. So let's set up another track here. And I'm going to rename these just so I don't get confused once the time comes. So let's do new scream mids. Let's duplicate this. So now let's try a higher scream. Let's take a listen to that. So that sounds pretty good. Let's bring in another layer so we can do a similar process that we just did with the other scream, which is panned hard right and hard left. So let's make this right. Two. We'll make this one left. Let's take a listen to that. So now what I'm going to do real quick, just for the sake of getting a better idea of what these will sound like, and just to give you a better idea of what it sounds like, is let's solo these. Let's blend them a little bit better. Let me change this loop. Let's Reimagined! Reimagined! Now let me just blend these all a little bit more. Now that's kind of a rough little outline to use. Obviously, whenever the mixer gets his hands on it, he's going to be able to fine-tune it and make it sit a little bit better in the mix. But that right there gives you an idea of a couple things you can do with screams just to add a little bit more life to the part.